see you guys in the dark.
I live in a small village in the very north of Scotland, so large shops and resources are a far distance. For that reason, I usually rely on internet shopping to get my needs. I needed to buy a bag for when I leave for university. One better than the one I already have. So I turned to Craigslist as I normally do. After looking for a short while, I came across a really good looking bag at only £15. I thought this was an absolute steal, so I phoned the seller. Immediately what struck me was the guy's accent. It was obvious that he wasn't Scottish, or even from the UK. He sounded Polish or something. He said he was from Glasgow. That's at least 5 hours by car from where I live. But when I told him the area I was from, he reluctantly offered to come by my house to give it to me. This all seemed strange because the sale was only £15. Nonetheless, I gave him my address. He said he'd drop by later on that day. Skipping forward about 7 hours, to about 10 p.m., I was thinking that he wasn't going to come, but around 10:20 there was a chap on the door. Surprised that it was so late, I looked out the window to the front door, and sure enough it was a young guy standing with a bag in his hand. Slightly relieved that it wasn't a robber, I went to the door and opened up. It was the guy from the phone for sure. The accent confirmed it. He said, "Hey, here it is." I smiled and took out my wallet, taking about £30 because of the trouble he went to come here in and the condition of the bag. He smiled and opened his arms as if he wanted a hug. Being a gay guy, I rarely turned down a hug and just assumed it was a cultural thing, so I hugged him and he left. I was still confused that he came all this way just for £15, but I didn't find it overly strange. At around midnight, I was finished around another episode of 24 and was ready to go to bed. From outside the house, I heard a car door shut. I paused the TV and went over to the window to see who it was. I recognized the car as being the green sedan that the guy had. But he wasn't there. No one was. It was at that point when I heard the back gate opening. I nearly shat myself. I ran quietly to the kitchen where the back door is, staying low down the way there to avoid whoever it was seeing me from the kitchen window. I usually don't lock both doors till I go to bed, so both were still unlocked. I grabbed the key from the counter and quickly locked the door. As I did, I got a fright at the security light turning on in the backyard. I looked up to see that it was him again. He had a creepy smile on his face. No teeth showing, just a smile. I stood up and shouted, "Whoa, dude, what the hell are you doing back there?" He said nothing, and just smiled, looking directly at me. I found myself just staring at him until the situation actually kicked in, and I took the keys from the back door and bolted to the front. About halfway to the front door, I heard the window smash in the kitchen. My stomach ached at the fact that he had already making his way into the house. I made a turn to go upstairs and towards the toilet so I could lock myself in there. When in the toilet, I heard him stumbling and breaking glass, falling to the floor. He was now in my house. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and quickly dialed 999. Told them of the situation as fast as I could, and they said they'll get the officers out there as fast as they could. The police station was just up from my village, so I knew someone would be here generally quick. The operator asked me to stay on the phone until someone arrived. I was focused on the guy's footsteps, which would slow down and speed up every so often. He eventually walked upstairs and tried to open the bathroom door. When he realized it was locked, he said, "Ah, I know you're in there, Cameron." Hearing him say my name made my stomach churn. I screamed, "The police are coming! Just back the f*** off, man!" After saying that, he started to kick the door. I backed up against it with more strength than I knew I had. Then in the distance, I heard the sirens and the blue lights reflecting from the bathroom window. He continued to kick the door, but then I heard the car doors outside open and fast footsteps. I heard the front door open and then a police officer with a taser yelled, "Drop the knife!" Again, I felt sick knowing he had a knife. It sounded as if he started running back downstairs. Then I heard a taser, and the guy screaming. Then a thump. After he came through, they officially arrested him for attempting murder and trespassing. I have pressed charges, but the fact is, he won't get any more than 7 months in jail. After that, he will be free to come right back. I am now trying to sell my house to get out of here as fast as possible. Years ago, when I was about 13, I made a post on Craigslist advertising babysitting services as a way to make some money. The morning after I made the post, I got a phone call from a man supposedly interested in hiring. As soon as I heard his voice, I got an anxious feeling. He was whispering very low and kind of slow the entire time. It was extremely off-putting. Sounded like he was middle-aged. So we exchanged hellos, and he says that he's calling about and asks what I'm charging. He asks my name, all sorts of weird questions. So anyways, he says he has a young son for whom he needs a babysitter. Then he begins asking me about my experience, and then strangely diving into overly lengthy descriptions of his own life. I don't remember the details of the conversation, but I do remember one thing. He asks extremely clearly, "Now, my son, sometimes he likes to touch himself. That wouldn't bother you, would it?" In his creepy, low, slow voice. I just remember being filled with anxiety at that and wanting to hang up immediately. It was just sort of beyond TMI. His voice and tone really made it a lot worse. He sounded serious, but at this point, I was partially convinced that this was some sort of prank, and I was almost certain he didn't have a kid. I had no idea how to respond to that, and even though this was on the phone, me being a stupid and at that point a petrified 13-year-old kid, I just responded with, "No," and I'm sure he realized how nervous I sounded because he just kind of gave a low chuckle and continued on. Because you know how little boys are. Honestly, a lot of details of that conversation are blurred, and it went by fairly quickly. I just remember kind of nodding off and yesing my way to the end when he asked my availability and said he would give a call back. He ended it with, "Okay, thanks," with a little chuckle and hung up. I can't remember whether he gave me his info or not, but I am pretty sure he did not call back. I do remember jumping onto my computer and taking my ad down as soon as possible. I felt like complete crap after that phone call, and wondered whether that was a normal discussion for an adult to try and have with a potential child babysitter. Definitely glad I never met this dude. Terrible, terrible vibes just through the phone. Not too long ago, I put up a post on Craigslist asking to either sell or trade my fish tank for a smaller one. I put in my phone number as the contact source and asked to text only. After a couple of hours, I got a text from somebody who was willing to trade. We agreed to meet at a Walmart in a couple of days when we were both free and do our trade. During those days, the guy kept on texting me, involving a small talk. He asked me about my name and where I worked, etc., and me being foolish, answered this. I used Craigslist often, and I had never really had a bad experience with anyone, so I never really thought this guy was weird. I saw him more like friendly. I told this guy what car I drove and what college I went to again, never really stopping to think what kind of info I was giving to a total stranger. When the day came to meet this guy, he told me he could only meet after 10 p.m. I thought that was odd, but agreed to meet him anyway since my poor fish were already stuck in a 5-gallon jug. So me and my boyfriend drove to the Walmart at about 10:15 and got there in about 20. The guy texted me and said he was already there in an old yellow Camaro. I replied saying we were both two in a gray van. He then texted me and said, "Who is we?" At that moment, I realized something was really off with this guy, and I replied by saying, "My husband and me." That was a lie, but I felt he should know I wasn't alone. He never responded after that text. My boyfriend and I went to the parking lot a couple of times looking for the yellow Camaro, but we never found it. I tried calling the guy, and he ignored my calls. We decided it was best to just leave. I don't know what could have happened if I met this creepy guy by myself. or even with my boyfriend there, but I have a feeling it would have not been something good. I removed the post from Craigslist that night and saved the creep's phone number just in case he tried contacting me again. A couple of weeks later, I got a text from several different phone numbers asking about the tank. I never responded to anybody because I believe it was the same guy since I, for one, deleted the post immediately. I hope he can't somehow track my phone, and of course, I'm not using Craigslist ever again. I really love Craigslist. I'd estimate that I've met maybe 300 people from buying or selling stuff. And for the most part, everyone was nice and harmless. However, I did run into 2 creeps who made me rethink meeting strangers alone to sell stuff. FYI, I was in my early 20s at the time. The first guy, it's 2009, and I'm staying with my parents for the Christmas holiday in a small town in Florida. I'm going through my childhood room and cleaning out the closet and find a giant CD holder full of maybe 100 really shitty CDs. It's the 21st century. No one uses CDs anymore. I figured I'd try to sell the CDs on Craigslist. I put up a listing, 100 CDs from the late 90s and early mid-2000s. Mix of pop and rock, all for $35 or best offer. The next day I get an email from a guy named John around 2 p.m. He says that he's in town temporarily and that he wants the CDs. He says he can pick them up after dinner around 8. I email him back my address and number and tell him to text or call when he's on his way. 8 p.m. comes around. I figure I've been stood up, which happens often on Craigslist. No big deal. My dad works for a liquor distribution company and would often do demonstration nights at restaurants and bars and would come home at bar closing time. This night, he gets home at around 3 a.m. I'm in college and a total night owl, so I'm still up probably eating junk food, surfing the web, watching horror flicks. I hear a car pull up. I look out the window and see him sitting in his car eating food. He often stops at Taco Bell on his way home and eats it in his car so my mom doesn't know he's cheating on his diet. Maybe 10 minutes later, my dad comes in and shouts my name. "There is someone here to see you. Can you please tell me why a stranger is showing up at my house at 3 a.m.? Huh? I run downstairs and my dad says some guy pulled up in the driveway and asked for me by name. I walk outside with my dad, and this guy is with maybe mid-30s gets out of his car. He says he's the Craigslist guy who wanted to buy my CDs. My dad goes back in the house. I tell the guy it's really, really late to just be stopping by, especially without texting first. However, since I'm awake, I go and grab the CDs. He then proceeds to drone on and on about why he's buying the CDs. He says he's engaged to a woman he loves very much, and all he wants to do is make her happy. He said that last week, someone broke into her car and stole all of her CDs. She was really upset and wanted to make it up to her. He looked on Craigslist and found my listing and was really excited because I had a bunch of CDs she used to have. Weird thing is, I didn't list any of the artists or bands because I was lazy, but I didn't think about that at the time. Anyway, he said he was getting it for her as a Christmas gift. He said he was staying with his future in-laws somewhere nearby and their family barbecue ran really late, which is why he never made it at 8 p.m. At this point, I've lost interest and say something along the lines of, "That's sweet. Next time, you should probably call or text the Craigslist instead of just showing up." I hand him the CDs, he hands me the cash, and I go back inside. 3 days later, I start getting texts from an unknown number. "Hey, I don't know my way around this town. Care to tour guide? I could really use a massage. Where can I get a massage in this town? You're Asian, do you massage? Would you take $40 for an hour? Happy ending?" Me. "Who the hell is this?" "Oh, I'm sorry. I bought the CDs from you the other day. Do you squirt?" I didn't respond, obviously. I show my friends that night and we laugh it off. Then the next day I get more texts. "I still have your address. I'm at the Bank of America near your neighborhood. I just got the 40, babe. Only 3 minutes away. Are you home? You fucking cunt. Stop ignoring me. I'm almost there." I immediately run downstairs to tell my dad and mom. It was nighttime, so we shut off all the lights outside and inside the house. My mom, little brother, and I went in my parents' room in the back of the house. My dad hid behind the curtains of the front bay window with a shovel in his hand. A few minutes later, I heard him run down the front hallway, fling the front door open, and run outside. We heard some faint shouting, so we all walked out of the bedroom. By that time, my dad came back in with his shovel, his face red and his hair disheveled. Apparently, the guy came driving down our street really slow. My dad recognized the car and went running outside with the shovel, yelling obscenities at the guy. The guy peeled off and never came back or texted me again. The second guy, I was moving from Florida to DC, and I was going to load up my car as much as I could with stuff. However, I lived on the 3rd floor, plus a bit of a walk from my assigned parking spot, so I figured I could use some help. I posted an ad on Craigslist. I said I was looking for someone to help me load some heavy stuff, like TVs, desks, etc. in my car. Less than an hour's worth of work, and I'd pay $45. I'd give the very first responder my number and address. He shows up. He was probably about 5'8", 350 pounds of pure fat. The sweat and smell coming off this guy in the Florida heat was pretty nauseating, but I didn't care as long as he did the job right. While he was carting heavy stuff, I was loading lighter things. Whenever I'd go upstairs to grab another load, he'd hurry up after me so he could walk to the stairs behind me. I had the door propped open so he didn't have to worry about me needing to unlock the door for him or anything. When he'd follow me upstairs, he made these weird grunting noises like, mm-hmm, but I assumed it was because he was out of shape. Eventually everything's loaded properly, save for some sweat smears on my stuff. I pay him and he drives off. I go back in my place to finish loading and cleaning. I go about 45 minutes later to put another load in my car, and I see his truck is back, parked across the street from mine. He's sitting in the driver's seat, looking at me. When he sees me notice him, he looks away. I walk over to his window and knock. He rolls it down and asks if I need help or if it was lost, and I ask if he needs help or if he was lost. I was really confused as to why he had come back, and I knew he didn't live near here. He didn't say anything, just rolled his window back up and drove off. Okay, whatever. Of course, 5 minutes later, my phone starts blowing up. I don't recognize the number, so I don't answer the calls. Then texts start rolling in. Him, I bet you taste salty and sweet. Me, who is this? Him, your pussy. Him, what are you up to tonight? I can come back over. I get the sinking feeling it's the Craigslist guy. He had never called me about the job when I gave him my number, so I didn't know what his number was. Him, I like your pink panties. Then I realized he was looking at my dress when I was walking up the stairs. I immediately feel like a total idiot for wearing a dress that day. He then started dialing my number over and over again. I didn't know how to block numbers through Sprint, so I had to just turn my phone off. Later, I was with my guy friend grabbing a bite and turned my phone back on. I got another text from the guy about how he wanted to toss me around like a rag doll and tie me up and make me beg for it. I show the text to my friend and tell him the story. The Craigslist creep then proceeds to start blowing up my phone again. So my friend answers and says he is going to cut his dick off and feed it to his dog if he ever contacts me again. I moved the next day, so I never had to worry about him randomly showing up in his truck again. Since then, I've bought and sold stuff on Craigslist, but I always make sure people meet me at a public place. I also stalk people's email addresses, Google Plus accounts, and etc. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.